I stared at the message from Evan, my older brother. Every word slicing through me like a cold blade. Don't come to Dad's birthday. If you show up, I'll have security escort you out. Don't embarrass the family. I gripped my phone tighter. My hands trembled. Not from anger, but from something far more familiar. The worn-out ache of being sidelined. Evan, the family's untouchable golden boy, was always the guardian of the perfect Whitmore image. And me, Haley? I was the shadow they tried to bury. Tonight, my father Alan Whitmore's 65th birthday was being held at Silver Creek Manor, the most luxurious resort in the Santa Barbara area. Energy executives and tech investors from all over the state were gathering for this high-profile event. And I had been cut out of it completely, like I'd never even been his daughter. A second message followed, this time from my stepmother Monica. Evan's right. Tonight is important for your father and his partners. Please, don't cause drama. Drama. That's what they called it when I didn't follow their blueprint. No one seemed to remember I'd graduated top of my class in engineering at Stanford, or that I turned down the logistics VP position my father tried to hand me like a Christmas bonus. I didn't want a pre-printed title. I wanted to earn my place, not carry the Whitmore name like a golden ticket. After I left Whitmore Energy 10 years ago, no one in the family asked how I was doing. No one cared about the sleepless nights in labs, the crushing student loans, or the moments I almost lost everything. To them, I was a public embarrassment. The daughter who dared say no to their carefully paved path. I still remember the look in my father's eyes the day I told him I wouldn't continue at the company. It wasn't anger. It was worse. Quiet disappointment. The kind that could gut your confidence with just a glance. I had thought about coming back, more than once, but every time I started drafting an email or reaching for my phone, something stopped me. Maybe it was Monica's voice, echoing in my mind, telling me I was ruining everything your father built. Or maybe it was Evan's smug laugh, during the last family meeting I ever attended, when he sneered, "What are you gonna do, Haley, start a battery lab in some garage like Steve Jobs?" They didn't know I did exactly that, not in a garage but in a rundown warehouse in Oakland. They didn't know I sold the only car I had to buy raw materials for my first prototype, because they never asked. And now they wanted to erase me from an event honoring the very man who used to boast about me before I refused to be his pawn in a corporate game. I stood and pulled back the curtain in my office, letting the morning light spill in. Beside my laptop sat a small mahogany box. I opened it and took out a single item. An old, worn silver crescent moon pendant. The last thing my mother gave me before she passed. I slipped it around my neck. It reminded me that I didn't belong to their rejection. I checked my email. The final confirmation from Summit Global Ventures had arrived. Everything was in place. 7 years ago, I walked out of the Whitmore Energy boardroom with a resignation letter barely 3 lines long and the stunned expression on my father's face etched permanently into memory. I was 29, fresh from a research program on conductive materials at MIT, offered a role titled Strategic Coordination Director, a glossy name for what essentially meant sitting quietly while Evan barked orders. I gave it a week. Just 7 days. In that time, I was called the tech girl twice, interrupted in 3 meetings because I lacked executive authority, and was told by Monica not to wear a white lab coat in the hallway because it looked a little poor. On the 8th day, I placed a design on the table, a prototype for an electronic battery module I had spent 2 years developing. If properly executed, the model could store 3 times more energy than standard lithium batteries at a quarter of the production cost. I detailed every application: public transport, renewable energy, even defense sectors. Evan looked at the sketch and burst out laughing in front of the entire board. "You think we're NASA, Haley? We don't fund science fair projects." My father sat silent, not a word in my defense. When the meeting ended, he offered a single line. "If you want to be an engineer, head to the shop floor and start learning how to assemble e-bike batteries. We need workers, not dreamers." I left that afternoon and never looked back. My mother had passed when I was 15. If she were still alive, she wouldn't have let me beg for permission to follow what I believed in. I moved into an old apartment on the eastern edge of Oakland. Cracked walls, squeaky floorboards. I rented a shuttered print shop nearby. Barely 1,500 square feet, but it had big windows for natural light and a high ceiling for my makeshift lab. For the first 3 months, I worked days at a supplemental research center in an industrial zone. Nights were for soldering circuits, coding systems, failing and trying again. At one point, I sold my mother's silver bracelet, her 18th birthday gift to me, to buy a new power source after a minor electrical fire. I learned patience in the silence. Every time I read another press release about Whitmore Energy signing more fossil fuel deals, I knew I hadn't left out of anger. I left because I couldn't betray my vision to serve someone else's legacy. 4 years later, a UC Berkeley professor asked to pilot my first prototype in a local grid project. The results exceeded expectations, a 38% drop in energy loss under high-temperature conditions, unheard of in standard battery systems. Word spread. Hailey Brooks, my mother's surname, began showing up in niche engineering forums. Then came the night I received an email from Alec Donnelly, CFO of a venture capital fund. "We'd like to fund the commercial version of your product. Please give us a shot." It took me 2 hours to reply, not out of hesitation but because every word in my business plan had to reflect what I'd carried silently for 7 years. I didn't need anyone to acknowledge me as a Whitmore. I would enter the market as a nobody, so they'd be forced to realize who they had left behind. And they truly had. Last year I came across a Sunday economy piece in the San Francisco Tribune. Whitmore Energy, declining, seeking clean energy partnerships to recover market share. There, standing next to a model wind turbine, the same one I once sketched for a board meeting they silenced me in, was Evan. No one knew the company they reached out to first was Lunatech Innovations. The one I'd built from scratch. They sent offers, letters, even a Thanksgiving gift basket. I didn't reply. I was waiting for the right moment. And that moment is tonight. On patent filings, investment contracts, and financial reports, the name Hailey Brooks appeared regularly, quiet, unassuming, but enough to unsettle those who once dismissed me, even if they didn't know who I really was. I chose my mother's last name to make sure no one ever mistook my success as a product of the Whitmore legacy. Brooks was the first woman in our family to graduate college. A nurse for 30 years without a single complaint, she once told me. "Don't live to please others, live in a way you won't regret when you look back." And I did exactly that. 2 years after Alec Donnelly's funding, I launched Lunatech Innovations, a startup focused on small-scale energy storage, first aimed at off-grid households where public utilities failed. I didn't claim to be a revolution. I just wanted a battery strong enough to store solar energy through the coldest winters. We started with a cylindrical module, about the size of a soda can. It could fully charge in 8 minutes and retain stable energy for 3 days. In our first month, we sold 26 units. By month 3, that number grew to 600. By month 6, a utility company in Colorado called us. They bought the entire batch for a field testing site. That winter, the area didn't suffer a single blackout. I never appeared in magazines. No interviews used my full name. Some niche tech bulletins called me Hailey B. That was enough. I let the product speak for itself. Last year I was invited to speak at a renewable energy conference in Seattle. Not as a guest of honor, but as the keynote. I wore a simple blue button-up and black slacks. I knew exactly how many skeptical stares I'd get from the front row. Polished suits and industry gatekeepers. I opened with one number, 38.2%. The thermal energy loss reduction in Lunatech's latest battery systems. No stage effects, no flashy graphics, just raw data and a single module on the table. By the end, 8 investors came forward. I turned down 7. The one I chose was Olivia Grant, CEO of Summit Global Ventures. a silver-haired woman of few words, whose gaze never left my prototype during the entire talk. In our private meeting afterward, she shook my hand and said, "Haley, we don't invest in dreams. We invest in people who make markets chase them. And you're one of the rare few." A month later, Summit invested $300 million into Lunatic to scale production of our commercial modules, systems designed to power electric vehicles, smart homes, and nationwide energy grids. Our valuation climbed to $3.9 billion and kept rising. Then came the unexpected. Whitmore Energy reached out 3 times in 6 months. First, a formal letter, the kind Monica liked to write, politely detached, proposing a collaboration on residential energy storage. Then an email from Evan, the first time he ever addressed me as Ms. Brooks, inquiring about licensing opportunities. I didn't respond. Not until Alec called me in late April. "Haley," he said over the phone as I stood in our Palo Alto control center. "They don't just want a deal, Whitmore is out of money. They need a lifeline to keep their investors." I didn't speak right away. I looked out the glass wall, down at the production floor, where hundreds of battery units were undergoing thermal stability testing. "And one more thing," Alec added. "They have no idea you're the CEO of Lunatic. They think it's a European founding group." I laughed, not out of arrogance, but because everything had finally come full circle. That afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror at the Four Seasons Hotel in Santa Barbara, fastening the crescent moon pendant around my neck. The soft silver shimmered faintly against my collarbone, the only thing I still had from my mother. Every time I wore it, I carried not just her memory, but the reason I never stopped moving forward. At exactly 6:15, a message from Olivia Grant lit up my phone. "Summit's car is here. We'll enter 2 minutes after you. Don't say a word. Let them figure it out." Tonight, at the Monarch Pavilion, the unofficial backyard for billion-dollar California deals, Summit Capital was about to unveil its strategic partnership with Lunatic in front of hundreds of elite guests. A merger valued near $1.2 billion, complete with operational control over a company gasping for air. Whitmore Energy. My father, Alan Whitmore, had no idea that the CEO of Lunatic was the same daughter he had erased from the family dinner table. I descended to the lobby in a black silk gown, no logos, no frills, just sleek enough not to get lost in a room soaked in curated opulence. When the driver opened the door, I stepped in and felt the tension wrap around me. Not anxiety, but the sharp stillness of someone walking into the final round. This time, as the one setting the rules. The car rolled past rows of historic mansions, turning onto the cobblestone path leading to the pavilion. Bentleys and Mercedes lined the lot like a silent procession. The air was thick with woody perfume, polite laughter, and precision-calibrated displays of wealth. Inside the grand hall, everything sparkled. The symphony played a gentle variation of Clair de Lune. Under chandeliers, I spotted Evan by the bar, speaking with a silver-haired man, probably a hedge fund manager. Monica laughed loudly at the center of the room. One arm draped over a younger woman, I guessed was a new wife to someone powerful. I didn't walk in just yet, I went straight to the check-in table. The young woman behind the tablet looked me over, cautious. "Ma'am, do you have a name on the list?" I smiled, voice calm like coastal wind. "Please check under Haley Brooks. Summit Capital sent confirmation." Her fingers flew across the screen, then froze. "Oh, yes. You're marked as a private guest. Someone from Summit reached out directly. Please, go right in." I stepped into the main hall, my heels clicked against marble floors like a metronome keeping time with my pulse. No one recognized me, not a soul, and that was exactly what made this moment perfect. Across the room, my father, the man once dubbed a titan of oil in the 90s, stood before a banner that read, "Happy 65th birthday, Alan Whitmore, American energy pioneer." His face was polished, proud, but behind the stage makeup I saw something hollow. I didn't move toward him. I remained by the main entryway, the very spot where every head would turn when tonight's true guest of honor arrived. A ripple of whispers stirred the room. Then, heads turned in unison as the double doors swung open. Olivia Grant entered, dressed in an ivory suit, serene as a judge. Behind her were Alec and several senior Summit executives. One step, then another. Olivia scanned the room and stopped. Right on me. She smiled, walked directly past my father and Evan and came to stand in front of me. Miss Brooks, thank you for coming. Summit is honored to walk beside you in this venture. The word Brooks echoed like a dropped glass. Dozens of eyes pivoted. I felt the room's temperature dip. Monica's grip tightened around her glass. Evan stepped back. And my father. The man who had never blinked in a 9-figure negotiation. Looked at me as if he'd just seen a ghost. I turned and shook Olivia's hand. I'm glad to be here, tonight's going to be unforgettable. And as if the universe wanted a drum roll, the orchestra stopped. Lights shifted toward the stage. The announcer's voice boomed across the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the stage. Summit Capital is proud to unveil a historic partnership featuring next-generation energy storage technology. The entire ballroom froze as Olivia Grant turned toward me and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Allow me to introduce the visionary behind the energy storage technology the entire industry is chasing. CEO of Lunatic Innovations, Hailey Brooks. I smiled and took a half-step forward. The chandelier light caught my silver crescent pendant, casting a delicate shimmer across the marble floor. The silence was absolute. Evan's eyes widened in disbelief. Monica's hand went limp, her wine glass dropped to the floor with a dull clack, unbroken but jarring. And my father stood frozen, gripping the edge of the banquet table, his knuckles pale as bone. I didn't walk toward them. I didn't need to. Their silence said everything. A ripple of whispers spread as the MC repeated, "She's the CEO of Lunatic?" From the front row, an older man stepped out, tailored charcoal suit, navy tie, steady footsteps. No one needed to be told who he was. Nathaniel Chase, founder and chairman of Summit Capital, known as the Silver Hand of American tech finance, had arrived. Every eye shifted toward him, including my father's. Chase stopped right in front of me, smiling warmly as he extended his hand. "Miss Brooks, it's an honor to finally meet you in person. Now we can truly begin a new chapter." I shook his hand, feeling my father's stare burning through me, as if he was still trying to confirm whether the daughter he had once dismissed from the boardroom could really be standing here now. My father staggered forward. "Nathaniel, Hailey, that's really her?" His voice wasn't angry, just stunned. "I thought she left the industry years ago." Evan chimed in, his voice cracking. Chase gave a quiet chuckle. "Maybe that's why none of you realized she's been leading from the shadows." Monica scanned the room, visibly unsettled. Who are you?" "Hailey Brooks? That name's never—" I turned to her, cutting in gently but firmly. "It's my mother's name. I stopped using Whitmore the day I walked out. That name didn't reflect who I was anymore." The words landed like a hammer on marble. A few guests instinctively stepped back. Investors began whispering, eyes darting between me and the Summit delegation. Evan gritted his teeth, muttering, "You came here for attention?" "No," I replied, my voice calm. "I'm here because Summit requested my presence. Tonight, they're announcing a strategic alliance with Lunatic, and if I'm not mistaken, our family company, or rather your company, is desperately searching for battery tech to stay afloat. Am I wrong?" My father opened his mouth, but Nathaniel raised a hand. "Let's make it official. No need to rehash what was said behind closed doors. For everyone in this room, Summit Capital has finalized a strategic technology partnership with Lunatic Innovations, under Ms. Brooks' leadership." A wave of stunned reaction swept through the crowd. Energy CEOs, fund managers, and reporters leapt to their feet. Some rushed toward the media section, where live stream cameras were rolling. I turned to Evan, the same man who had once laughed at my first sketch. His face was bright red, his jaw clenched like a vice. Monica clung to my father's arm, whispering furiously. But my father didn't look at her. He looked only at me. Long and hard. As if trying to reconcile the woman before him with the girl he once silenced. He spoke, voice low and gravelly. "Haley, is it true? The battery tech everyone's chasing? It's yours?" I nodded. "It's the product of 7 years of being underestimated, Dad. Of long nights, failed prototypes, and a belief in myself that nobody in this family ever had." The room held its breath. Nathaniel gave me a subtle nod. "I think it's time, Miss Brooks." I stepped onto the stage. My heels echoed against the marble like a metronome ticking off the end of an era. I stood center stage at Monarch Pavilion, cold white light wrapping around me like a spotlight meant not for praise but for reckoning. The entire room held its breath. I could hear fabric shift as someone tightened their grip on a chair. I inhaled deeply, not from nerves, but because for the first time in 7 years I had the space to say what was once crushed under glances of dismissal. "My name is Haley Brooks," I began, voice steady and clear. "Founder of Lunatech Innovations. Developer of the multi-layer energy cell technology that top firms are now racing to acquire. And I'm also Haley Whitmore, the daughter cast out of this family for refusing to walk a path laid out for her." The room exploded with whispers. My father stepped back. Evan sputtered like someone blindsided. You changed your name? You're Haley Brooks? You own Lunatech?" Monica stared, her polished composure cracking. "This can't be. You were a failure." I kept my voice calm. "A failure? Maybe, if leaving with nothing counts. But if you've paid attention to the clean energy sector, you'd know. Lunatech was the first to stabilize modular battery systems at high temperatures under a cost of $300 per unit. And now Lunatech has officially partnered with Summit Capital to acquire 65% controlling interest in Whitmore Energy." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several investors from the Whitmore side stood in disbelief. Evan shouted, "You can't do this. This is my father's company, it's mine." I turned toward him, no need to raise my voice. "Your company is circling the drain. Stock has dropped 43% in 6 months. Venture credit lines were denied extensions. Summit bought the original debt and we're pivoting to full electrification. Built on my tech. As of today, I'm the interim CEO for this transition." My father's hand trembled as he reached for the edge of a banquet table. I looked him in the eye, not with hatred, but with the clarity of truth. "You had this chance 7 years ago, Dad. When I presented the first prototype to this board." Evan laughed. "You stayed silent. Monica called it a toy. So I left. Not out of spite, but because I knew staying meant burying everything I believed in." Nathaniel Chase, standing beside me, pulled a thick folder from his briefcase, laying it on the podium with a firm tap. "This is the legal confirmation. Starting tomorrow, Haley Brooks will lead Whitmore Energy under the new name, Lunatech Whitmore Industries. She will oversee full restructuring, operations, production, and leadership." Evan lunged toward the contract. "You can't, I'm still CEO." Nathaniel didn't flinch. "You were appointed internally, never ratified. Summit Capital is now the majority stakeholder. Per the debt acquisition agreement, we are authorized to restructure the leadership. You're no longer CEO. Effective next week, you'll begin transition out." Evan's face flushed red. He slammed his fist onto the table. Monica gripped her husband's arm and backed away. My father didn't move. Frozen as if realizing, finally, what he had let slip through his hands. He looked at me, no longer angry, no longer doubtful, but aware of everything he thought he could control, slipping away. Not because I stole it. Because I earned it. I stepped off the stage and walked toward him. You never listened, Dad. No one ever asked what I needed, what I was building, but I built it anyway, without your name, without pity. I didn't come back to destroy what you created, I came back to save it. I paused, steady. You may not like how I did it, but at least respect that I chose to do it my way. I turned to walk away, but his hand reached out, trembling, and grasped mine. He didn't say a word. I gently pulled away. Not rejecting, but not holding on either. Late that evening, after most of the guests had left Monarch Pavilion, I stood alone in the west hallway, where dim lighting filtered through frosted glass, casting long streaks of shadow across the cold stone floor. Outside, the wind swept down from the Santa Ynez Hills in quiet, steady breaths. I closed my eyes, letting my shoulders relax. But only seconds later, I heard the slow, deliberate steps of leather shoes echoing behind me. I didn't turn around. If you're here to argue, I said softly, you're too late. Silence hung thick, the kind that made every footstep feel weighted. I didn't come to argue. His voice came, deep and stripped of its usual authority. I came to ask, was everything you said true? I turned to face him. Alan Whitmore, once dubbed the negotiation machine of the oil sector, now looked like an aging man clinging to the last shards of dignity. His tie hung loose. His eyes, no longer sharp, carried the haze of disbelief. I pulled out my phone, opened the Lunatic security app, entered the authentication code, and handed it to him. Here's a list of 23 patents granted over the last 5 years, I said. All filed under my name and Lunatic's. 4-layer thermal regulation, adaptive current flow systems, rapid charge circuitry, the very foundations of the energy platform you and Evan have been trying to license. From an anonymous company, the person you've been chasing for nearly a year is me. He didn't reach for the phone right away. He just stared at the screen, as if afraid to blink. When he finally took it, his fingers trembled. His eyes moved across 3D models, engineering diagrams, technical notes, each stamped with lead engineer. Haley Brooks. All of this is yours? He asked. Not Summit's R&D team? Summit funds. They don't invent, I said. Every prototype, every test run, done in my warehouse in Oakland. 16-hour days. No paycheck, no headlines. And no one in this family ever asked. He swallowed hard, bracing against the window frame for balance. I was wrong. The words came out in a whisper, but they carried the weight of years. Wrong about what, Dad? I asked. For not giving me a chance? Or for never believing I was capable in the first place? For staying silent, he replied, voice tight. When Monica mocked you. When Evan laughed at your designs. I heard it all and said nothing. I told myself you needed to learn how the world works. But the truth is, I gave up on you before you ever failed. I let the silence linger. Then, I stepped closer. My tone softening. But not yielding. You weren't wrong for wanting me to grow up, but you were wrong for thinking success only comes in one shape, yours. I didn't betray you by choosing a different path. I just wanted to prove that I could build something without asking permission. He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the diagrams glowing from the screen. Then he looked up, voice unsteady. Can you forgive me? I didn't answer right away. My hand instinctively brushed the silver pendant at my collar. My mother's. Forgiveness, I said gently, takes time. But I can give you a second chance. On one condition. He straightened a little, the faintest trace of hope in his eyes. Starting tomorrow, you'll no longer interfere in Lunatic Whitmore's technical decisions. I'll lead the restructuring. You may keep an honorary title, if you'd like, but no more veto power. If you agree, we move forward together. If not, Summit and I will shift our technology to writer energy. And Whitmore? The room went still. No more family emotion. No more sentiment. This was business. My final offer. He held my gaze for what felt like a full minute. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'm ready to learn, he said quietly. If you're willing to teach me. I extended my hand. It was the first handshake between us, not between a father and daughter, but between two business leaders. One who thought he had seen it all, and one who had built something no one thought was possible. As I pulled my hand away, I said only one thing. This time, you need to listen. Really listen. Because there won't be a third chance. The next morning, inside the top floor boardroom of Whitmore Energy headquarters, the atmosphere was taut as wire. This session? Once home to historic handshakes and multi-million-dollar negotiations, now awaited a single signature that would seal the fate of the company. Nathaniel Chase sat at the head of the table, sunlight from the massive window behind him casting a soft glow onto the open leather folder in front of him. To his right sat me, Haley Brooks. On his left, Summit's legal counsel. Across from us, my father held the pen. His hand trembled slightly. Monica was absent. According to Evan, who tried hard to keep his voice even. She didn't want to witness the family legacy being handed over to an outsider. I wasn't surprised. People who live for image are always the first to disappear when that image begins to crack. My father looked at me one last time before signing. Are you sure about this, Haley? You really want to tie your name to something this broken? I answered plainly. I'm not tying my name to a wreck, I'm rewriting it. He nodded, and then, with the quiet slide of ink over paper, he signed. Soft, almost invisible, but it marked the closing of an entire era. When his pen lifted, the room seemed to exhale. Nathaniel stood, extended his hand toward me. Congratulations, the new CEO of Lunatech Whitmore Industries. I shook his hand, not for ceremony, but because this handshake, this one, was the only one I ever needed. I hadn't returned. I had arrived. Evan stood abruptly, nearly knocking his chair over. You think this is over? He snapped. You're handing the whole company to someone who vanished for 7 years just to play mad scientist? I met his glare, calm and unbothered. During those 7 years, I built a billion-dollar company without a single dollar from this family. While you burned through millions on dead-end projects and cocktail party PR. Unless you have something to contribute to this restructuring, I suggest you leave the room. Evan's face turned crimson. He hurled his documents across the table and hissed. Just wait. You're not the only one who knows how to make waves. He stormed out, each step like thunder across the marble. The boardroom door slammed shut. But no one followed him. Every eye was on me now. My father adjusted his jacket and looked at me again, this time with no regret, no shame, but with acknowledgement. So, what's the new CEO's first order of business? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Dismantle the old strategic team, build a new R&D unit from Lunatech engineers, terminate all contracts tied to fossil fuel assets, and within 60 days, activate the next-gen battery line at the Fresno plant. The Whitmore advisor across the table exhaled sharply, almost a laugh of disbelief. Fresno, that facility's been shut for 3 years. Exactly, I cut in. It's untouched. No backlogged contracts, no outdated equipment leases. We need a clean launch site. Fresno is perfect. Nathaniel nodded approvingly. I'll handle the capital and infrastructure. Haley, execute the plan. You have full authority. I left the boardroom soon after. As I walked the long corridor lined with framed portraits of Whitmore CEOs, from the founder to Alan, then Evan. I paused at the last spot, a bare wall with a brass plate that read, "Reserved for the future." I looked at it for a long moment, then walked on. I didn't need my face on a wall, I needed results. And the first would come the moment Fresno lit up, Not with oil, not with gas, but with the very energy I spent my youth building in silence. Quiet, unseen, but unstoppable. Like the conviction I carried since I was 15. As I passed Evan's former office, his nameplate had been removed. A new one was being mounted. Haley Brooks, Chief Executive Officer. The assistant saw me pass and quickly stood. "Congratulations, Ms. Brooks." I smiled. Not for the title, but because today, at last, I was the one making the decisions. Not through lineage, not through inheritance, but because I earned every step of it. That night, after the final lights in the main offices of Whitmore Energy dimmed, I remained seated alone in a side conference room, once used for middle management training. On the table sat the first phase personnel transition plan, beside a cup of coffee long gone cold. A soft, hesitant knock broke the silence. I didn't look up. "Come in." The door opened slowly. My father stood there, no tie, suit jacket draped over his arm. His face looked heavier than usual, not with command, but with the quiet weariness of a man trying to untangle what had already unraveled. He sniffed, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "You're still here?" I didn't answer. I simply slid the chair across from me out, an unspoken invitation. He stepped in and sat down, leaving a respectful space between us. His hand rested on the table, tapping lightly, as if testing the words before speaking. "Haley," he finally said. "I came to apologize." I looked up at him. For the first time there was no title between us, no CEO, no chairman. Just two people, face to face, with everything that had broken between them. "I'm sorry I didn't see you," he continued, locking eyes with me. "Sorry I let pride cloud my judgment. And for staying silent, when I should have spoken up." I said nothing, just rested my hand on the cold grain of the table. His voice softened to a near whisper. "I didn't just lose a successor. I lost the chance to be proud at the right time. You did what I never believed you could. Not because you weren't capable, but because I was too attached to my own legacy." I tilted my head, studying the creases around his eyes. "Let me ask you something." He hesitated. "Can you forgive me?" The question lingered in the air like an arrow sunk deep into hardwood. I straightened, didn't answer right away, and instead asked calmly, "Are you ready to learn from your daughter?" He looked startled, probably expecting a yes or no, not that. But I let the question sit, deliberately. I wanted him to consider it, not as a corporate figure, but as a father. After a long pause, he nodded. "I'm not just ready to learn, I want to, from the beginning. No pride, no excuses." I closed my eyes for a beat, then exhaled. "Then tomorrow, 9 a.m., start by listening to the engineering team's production brief. No interruptions, no commentary, just listen." He nodded again, slower this time and deeper. "All right." When he left, I didn't walk him out. I didn't need to. That moment was enough. The first brick of something unspoken. Not quite forgiveness, but maybe movement, a start. The next morning, I walked the long hallway toward the CEO's office. A new nameplate had already been mounted to the frosted glass. Haley Brooks, CEO. I paused for a moment, hand resting on the matte steel door handle. Inside was the same room my father once used to make his biggest decisions, and the same room I'd once been asked to leave as an unqualified intern. It didn't look the same anymore. The portraits were gone. The heavy wood desk replaced with a simple glass one. In the corner stood an empty bookshelf. I planned to fill it with my first drafts, a quiet reminder of the path I carved. I took my seat and opened my laptop. The morning sun spilled across the screen. Dozens of congratulatory emails had flooded in, but I skipped them, scrolling to one folder. Access request, Evan Whitmore, unread. I stared at the subject line. I didn't open it. Instead, I opened the leadership calendar, clicked Add Executive Member, and typed in a new entry. In the description, I wrote, "New role, not someone with the Whitmore name, but someone with the right mindset." A breeze nudged the white curtain beside the window. I leaned back in my chair. This office used to symbolize inherited power. Now it stood for something else entirely. A daughter who didn't come back to reclaim but to redefine. And this time, no one could strike my name off the list again. Haley's story is a powerful reminder that recognition doesn't have to be begged for, and that believing in yourself is stronger than any legacy handed down. She didn't return for revenge, but to prove that true capability isn't rooted in bloodlines or titles, but in clarity of purpose and quiet perseverance. In real life, if you've ever been overlooked or pushed aside, remember, you don't need their permission to succeed. You just need the courage to walk forward and never look back. What do you think about Haley's journey? Was she too harsh? Or did she earn every inch of her place today? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more honest, moving stories about family and resilience.